Dakota Territory, Fort Abraham Lincoln, 1875. Originally settled by the Mandan in the 1870s, the area was a village consisting of approximately 86 earth lodges. It was called On a Slant, and its population was about 1,000 to 1,500 Mandan natives. Fort Abraham Lincoln was first called Fort McKean, named for Colonel H. Boyd McKean, a famous soldier who fought and died in the Battle of Cold Harbor in the Civil War. The fort was just an infantry post when it was built in 1872. Later, a cavalry post was added because of its size. It needed a bigger name, Fort Abraham Lincoln. The purpose of the fort was to house the military and defend the Northern Pacific Railroad crews on the western side of the Missouri River from attacks, mainly from the Lakota and Standing Rock. Back in 1875, when it was still active, Fort Abraham Lincoln was a huge fort. It was considered the finest fort of its time. It had several buildings for many purposes, such as dead houses and steam mills. It was an efficient fort because its facilities were necessary to meet any of the soldiers' and officers' needs. It had only 3 blockhouses with fences around them. The fort was actually more like a small city, and it was very big for its time. The cavalry post was so big that it even had room for 600 horses. It is said that it also housed 500 troops. The fort originally consisted of 24 buildings. Among the 78 permanent wooden structures at Fort Abraham Lincoln were a post office, telegraph office, barracks for 9 companies, hospital, dead house, 11 officers' quarters, 6 cavalry stables, a guardhouse, granary, quartermaster storehouse, steam mill, bakery, hospital, laundress's quarters, and log scouts' quarters. It also had Gatling guns, a sundial, and a post cemetery. The officers' quarters were buildings that could house either 2 families or several bachelor officers in each building. The buildings were not furnished, only insulated buildings on the post. Any second lieutenant could be forced out by a higher-ranking officer. The commanding officer's quarters was the only single-family home on the post. The commanding officer did not share his quarters. There were 2 separate quarters built. The first one burned down in 1874. The second one was rebuilt in the spring and summer of 1874, but it was very different from the original one. Custer had actually rebuilt it. His house was different from the rest because Elizabeth, his wife, didn't like straight halls, so there were little side rooms. The fort was abandoned in 1891 after the completion of the railroad to Montana in 1883. A year after the fort was abandoned, local residents disassembled the fort for its nails and wood. Today the house and several other major fort buildings, including the barracks, the fort's makeshift theater, a stable building, and several blockhouses, have been rebuilt. It was restored and rebuilt in 1989.